Hello and welcome to Extraordinary Women TV with Shannon Skinner. Well, today is National Philanthropy Day, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate than to be speaking with my first guest, who is Rosemary McCarney. She is the President and CEO of Plan Canada, and we're going to be talking about the importance of giving back. Later in the segment, before we take a break, I'll have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top success tip. You'll hear Rosemary's. In the second half of the show, we'll be talking about how you can create a workplace that is good for everyone. So stay tuned. Well, my first guest, Rosemary McCarney, President and CEO of Plan Canada. Now, Plan is one of the world's oldest and largest international development agencies. Plan's mission is to improve the lives of children and their families in the poorest of countries around the world. Now, Rosemary, that's quite a mission.
It is a large mission.
Well, hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, it's really great having you here. And of course, it's National Philanthropy Day, and what a great way then to celebrate by having you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, you've had a really interesting career. I mean, you began as a lawyer, practicing corporate law. Let's trace your career path.
Well, I think I've been very lucky. I've had a fascinating career path. I've never actually done anything or had a job that I haven't enjoyed. But way back, I remember I decided I wanted to go to law school because I thought what I wanted to do was to work on First Nations rights issues at a very early stage. And I remember my father sitting me down, because I thought that meant I should go into social work or something of that nature. And he said, you know, if you're capable, you should go to law school. And the reason you should go to law school, because that will give you the tools to be able to impact policy changes. And that way you can help more people than simply by working in a specific community or neighborhood. And I took that to heart, and I decided, and some people just shake their heads when I say this, I decided about age 12 that I was going to go to law school. And so it's been fairly consistent since then, though, you know, I think that what's true of most people in their careers is that there are a lot of curves in life. You know, children come along, partners come along, and so I think it's good to keep your eye on the big picture, but be willing to be quite agile and adaptive. But I am where I want to be, and I think it's where that conversation when I was a 12-year-old has led me, and that has been a consistent thread through the various turns that have taken. So over my career, I've been so lucky. I've worked in about 100 countries around the world. I've worked with some of the most extraordinary institutions and organizations, the United Nations, many wonderful NGOs, some of which are here in Canada, with governments around the world. And so I've been very fortunate to be able to do something I love and have impact.
Now, I have to ask you, I mean, every morning when you wake up, there's something that is driving you, that inspires you to do the work that you do. What is it?
Well, I think it's two things. I have a remarkable organization in Plan Canada. There's about 140 of us who work together every day. I probably work with the most passionate, intelligent group of young men and women imaginable. I can't imagine a more dynamic, thoughtful, and passionate, I use that word all the time, passionate, but pragmatically passionate work team. And together what we're able to do is not just to deliver high quality programmatic impact in 60 countries around the world, but we move policy. We change policies all the time in countries on the other side of the world, as well as here at home. We're able to influence the bigger picture so that we're actually changing the lives of people forever.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Plan Canada. And Plan you know, is one of the world's oldest international development.
75 years next year.
75 years.
There aren't very many corporations or institutions that can claim that. It's a marvelous organization that has changed over the years and has adapted to a changing world as well, and I think that's its real success.
Now let's talk about, the programs that Plan Canada has in place, and sort of, what it does.
Right. Well, PLAN is part of the International Federation, Plan International. So we work in over 60 countries around the world. In a country like Zimbabwe, for example, we've been there for 25 years. In Colombia, where I was a couple of weeks ago, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary in Colombia next year. In Haiti, our anniversary is, I think, 35 years next year. So when we commit to a country, and we commit to communities, and we are in over 58,000 villages and communities around the world, we make a long-term commitment of 8 to 12 years minimum, because we know that's what it takes to build human capacity as well as infrastructure to really set communities on a sustainable path. And sometimes it's longer, and the reason it's longer is because the communities where we work are very fragile. They're vulnerable to natural disasters as well as political disasters, and so they get knocked off their development path. And our job is to make sure that we support them to get back on that, so that we can leave them in a way that we know that the human capacity, in particular the human capacity, is there to have a vibrant community for many, many decades.
And obviously, it's important. I know that you do get funding, but for individuals to be thinking about giving, organizations like yours count on the giving heart.
Absolutely. I think that we're very lucky because we have about 180,000 Canadians who support us in every corner of this country. That it's just so powerful, and I'm struck every day at the generosity of Canadians who have come to us and supported us year over year, and through their very tough times sometimes. And whenever a disaster hits, they give again, or if there's a special need, they give again. And the inherent generosity of Canadians is truly staggering. And what we try to do is work very closely with the Canadian government as well. And the Canadian government is a wonderful place to leverage the giving of individual Canadians. So all of the international development agencies in Canada rely very heavily on that partnership of their work with the Canadian government's objectives and with individual Canadians. And I think it's the fact that individuals give in whatever form they can. They give of their time, they give of their thought leadership, and they give money, because all of this does take money in its fullest sense, and they give in whatever way they can and as much as they can, and that's truly remarkable. When people say, "What do you want?" and I always say, make sure you hold us accountable. I care less about who they give to than that all of us give whatever we can in whatever form we can, and then and really do your research, understand the charity that you're giving to, make sure it aligns with what you care about, what you think is important, and then hold us accountable. Because if we're not being held accountable, I think that. I think we should be, and I think we need to answer some tough questions if we're not measuring up.
Now, one of the programs, more recent programs, is your Because I'm a Girl program. Let's just talk about that. What is it about?
Well, Because I'm a Girl is something that's very near and dear to all of our hearts. We firmly believe, and we base this on research that we do every year. We do an annual report on the state of the world's girls, and we take a thematic question and then track what's happening to girls. And we're also tracking 130 little girls who this year are turning 5. We started tracking them when they were born, and we'll continue to track them until they're age 9, halfway to adulthood. And what we're learning from that is the kinds of interventions and opportunities that are possible with girls. And while we could talk extensively, unfortunately, about the plight of little girls around the world, the numbers are staggering in terms of how many girls are not in school, not even primary education. The fact that the leading cause of death for little girls 15 to 24 years of age, little girls, young women, is pregnancy, that they're being married off at far too young an age and then and then becoming pregnant at far too young of an age for their bodies. Those are the plight numbers, and while we could focus on that, what we like to do and what we think is important is to balance that out with the opportunity that by investing in girls, by making sure girls get an education, by making sure that the household chores don't keep them from being able to realize their full potential, by allowing them to be girls and young women and not putting them into forced and arranged marriages, that everyone benefits. At the household level, the productive assets of girls being involved in contributing to household income and household skills acquisition, as well as at the national and global level, we've tracked those numbers, and we know the multiplier effect that we can have on global and national economies by investing in girls. So we try to talk about it in a kind of a holistic way, that there is the plight issues and we can get at those plight issues, but the leveraged multiplier that we will have by addressing the plight and the real rights of girls that are too often ignored in so many societies, that we will have this transformative impact at the household, at the community, and at the national level.
And you know, of course, the program is you know, encourages Canadian girls to get involved. I mean, right here.
That's right.
In our own backyard.
Well, Canadian girls are a force. And when we talk about the plight and power of girls, when you talk about Canadian girls, you can be very much caught up in the power of these young women. We have about 50,000 Canadian girls following us on Facebook. They've set up school clubs, Because I Am a Girl clubs. We have about 40 to 50 girls who are part of our Speakers Bureau, and they speak to the minister on the status of women, and they go to Ottawa and they go to New York and represent girls worldwide. Canadian girls, we want to engage them because we think they want to be connected to girls across the world. They have as much in common as they have that is different. You know, the material wealth of Canadian girls is a differentiator. But when you get girls together, whether from Cameroon or Zimbabwe or Laos, with Canadian girls, they're just girls, and they have common aspirations for what they want to do. They want to change lives.
Now, Rosemary, we're going to take a quick break, and before we do, it's my Good to Know Minute. And I know you've got a great tip for the viewers, so jump right in there.
Well, you know, I often get asked, and I think that what's fundamentally important is to keep your eye on the long game. There's lots of things that as young girls and women are going to come in and knock you off what you really want to do and where you really want to get to. And what's really important is get back onto that long track and keep your eye on the goal. And I think if you're passionate about what you want to do and you're clear about what you want to do, acknowledge that you might have to accommodate and compromise at different points in your life for any number of personal or professional reasons. But if it's worth doing, it's worth working really hard to get there.
Well, thanks for that. That's good to know. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Rosemary McCarney, President and CEO of Plan Canada. So stay where you are.
In the developing world, millions are denied their most basic rights, simply because they are girls. The right to eat, the right to learn, the right to live. And yet we know that when we give girls even a small chance, they can change the future for themselves, their communities, and even the world. Because I Am a Girl is Plan Canada's movement to create a brighter, safer future for girls everywhere. Go to becauseimagirl.ca and join us. Girls are the answer, and so are you.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Shannon Skinner, and I'm speaking with Rosemary McCarney, who's the President and CEO of Plan Canada. We are talking about Because I'm a Girl campaign, of course, which is dedicated to helping the issue of girls' rights and eradicating, not so much the issue of girls' rights, but eradicating gender inequality around the world. And it starts right here in Canada.
It does start right here in Canada because there's great opportunities for Canadians to be engaged in these issues. There's no simple solution to poverty. It takes long and hard work, and you have to have a deep commitment to setbacks and building human capability. And fundamentally, Canadians aren't going to solve global poverty by themselves or in conjunction with governments. It's going to take people real people in communities, all people, the children, the young people, the women, and the men, the traditional leaders, the political leadership. And so when plan goes into a country and into a community, we take that long-term view, because while infrastructure is the easy thing, anyone can put up schools and dig wells and build health clinics. It's what happens in those bodies that makes the difference. And so, you know, we have to train gifted teachers, and we have to make sure they're being paid and given a contract by the government year over year over year. We have to make sure that the shelves are full in that health clinic long after we go. And so what is the pricing that we need to do to ensure that drugs are always available for those in need in remote communities? When the well's engines break down, the generator breaks down, who's going to make sure that that generator gets fixed in time, and that well isn't sitting there for 3 years not being able to be used by the women, and they've gone back to drawing water miles down the road from dirty streams? That's human capacity, and that takes a long time to do. And what we're really fortunate, I think, is I think Canadians are so sophisticated today on that there's no easy answers to this, and there's no silver bullet. It's long and hard work, and it's painstaking, and it's engaging people in their own solutions. And so community engagement, community participation is just the core of how Plan goes about its work. And we're able to do that because Canadians give us what I call patient capital. In the financial markets, they would call it patient capital. I think it's the same thing with philanthropy. They trust us that it's going to take a long time, and we're not going to turn things around on a dime, but we will be successful. We do have a plan, we do have a strategy, and most importantly, we have the partnership of real people in real communities on the other side of the planet. And I think it's magical that Canadians understand that. It's not that they're ever going to see their names on a school or a health clinic on University Avenue in Toronto or in one of our major cities. They know that, but they know that what they're doing has impact, and they trust us to steward their philanthropy in a way that they know that they are having an impact with that, and a place on the other side of the planet. And I just think that's magical.
And so, what have you been, have you discovered is the greatest challenge then in of course, eradicating gender inequality and, of course, poverty?
Well, you're going at things in a multifaceted way. There's no single answer. So when Plan goes in, we're looking at this in a comprehensive kind of whole of community way. So it's about getting everyone on side. So it's sitting down and having those long conversations where sometimes you're changing deeply held perspectives on what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate, and you're trying to prove and kind of extend people's planning lines, planning horizons from subsistence and survival to thinking about what would you like your community to look like in 5 years and 10 years. And what we find is men have a different perspective than women, and youth have a different perspective than men and women, and children have a different perspective. So for example, remember the horrible tsunami on New Year's Day some years ago?
That's right, yes.
Well, people didn't go into those communities and ask the children how do they want their communities rebuilt. So when Plan was brought in to fix some things after the fact in a couple of the countries, the children weren't going back into their new schools. And so we asked the children, we sat them down, because that's what we always do. We said, why aren't you going back into the school? What's wrong? And they told us. They said, we want the schools to have lower windows. No one had thought about that, because those children want to see the wave when it comes next time. They don't want to be caught by surprise, because some of these children were scrambling up hills out of their schools. They also told us they wanted 2 doors, not 1. Because they had seen friends getting squashed trying to run out of the schools as the waves were coming. They also wanted the schools, everyone had thought, oh, this time it'll be brick schools. They had seen too many people killed by falling concrete blocks and bricks. They wanted their schools made of wood, because the wood had allowed some of them to float and survive. Wisdom. They wanted fish ponds in the center of their villages. And he said, why do you want fish ponds? Because we don't want our fathers going out to sea to fish again. And they wanted their schools at the center of the village, not on the side of the village. And they had all kinds of thoughtful responses that the adults had never thought about because they didn't talk to the children. And so it's so important that we talk to everyone and that we have full community engagement and hard conversations and sort through diverse opinions to get at some of these root things. And then you're looking at the health of the community, the educational future of the community, livelihood, in particular microfinance, as we all know, is a major tool, and vocational training, really hard skills training for young men and women so that they are part of building that community and contributing their skills to a very long-term view of what that community can look like, the ultimate potential of their community.
So Rosemary, what can we do, what can parents do to engage the new generation or younger generations to start thinking about philanthropy? Because we're building, obviously we're, this is if we're talking about the long term, we need to be thinking about helping our generation start thinking about that here and giving back now.
You can never start too young, and that's fundamental. I think children learn from parents' examples. And so if they see their parents going out and doing work with community organizations or contributing at the food basket or something of that nature, if parents sit down with their children and have conversations about what's going on and social injustices that are occurring in their own community and around the world, those are those conversations that are without value. They're just extraordinarily important. And those are rich and deep conversations. I always say to people, you always have voice. And so when there's an election in your community or at the provincial or national level, volunteer and take your children along. Let them know that they have a voice in a rich democracy like Canada. When you're making decisions about your own giving or philanthropy or volunteerism, discuss it with your children and ask their views. I'm astounded by Canadian Plan Canada supporters who attach to us in so many different ways. And some sit down and they go through our Gifts of Hope catalog at the breakfast table or the dinner table and talk about giving differently this year instead of the next iPod or toy or whatever. They talk about what about livestock in a village that needs it, or malaria nets, or school books, or scholarships. What about different ways of giving to your teacher, or would you forego this birthday gift this year, or those kinds of conversations that I think make real the issues of justice and equality that we need to be discussing all of the time. Even in a country like Canada, there's far too much that's not right that we should be addressing. And I think those conversations that are held year over year, month over month with your families and in your communities and setting the model. But even if you don't have resources, even if you're not from a family that has a lot of disposable income, you always have time and you always have your voice.
Now, there's one last question that I would love to ask you, and to give an example of a story of when you have gone in and impacted a girl's life or a community, and that's in turn touched your heart.
Well, in my world, there are many. I think I have a special place for children in conflict zones, and I've been in a lot of conflict zones through my career, and sometimes you just feel a certain sense of both failure and hopelessness, and then you sit and talk to the kids. And I remember this one little girl. It was my first time in Darfur, and we were sitting in a classroom, and she was sad. She was about 4 or 5, and she was in a little nursery program in one of the camps. And she said, next year I'll be able to go out and fetch the water, just like my mom and my older sisters. And she was so proud of this, that this tiny little girl, she would be big enough to do that. And my heart broke, because I know what happens when women have to leave the camp to fetch the wood and the water, and how vulnerable, incredibly vulnerable they are. And, you know, I was sitting there, and I came back, and I said to my husband, I said, I'm going to do something about Darfur. And he said, really, Rosemary, you know, it was New Year's, and he said, most people are thinking about joining a gym, but you're going to do something about Darfur. And we were driving in the car, and he was kind of chuckling and rolling his eyes, but he also knows me well enough. And that's, I took our policy to the International Board of Plan, and I said, we're going to commit to raising the funds, but we need to program in those camps, and we need to start doing it right away. And so 6 years later, we are programming in Darfur with children, a high focus on education and emergencies, so that children don't lose those incredibly important years when they're on the run in conflicts, or sitting in horrible situations in refugee camps, or internally displaced person camps. And so we have a very robust education program working in about 5 of the largest of the refugee camps. So those conversations can be, they hit at your core, and you just realize we need to do something, and I can do something about this. And sometimes it's small and sometimes it's big, but I know that capacity is in every single one of us to do something.
Well, Rosemary, I've truly enjoyed this time speaking with you and finding out more about your life and more about Plan Canada. So for anyone out there who wants to find out more information about the organization, where should they go on the internet?
Well, the easiest place to go is plancanada.ca, and
Okay.
I think we have a rich information-based tool in our website, and it leads you to Because I Am a Girl, and it leads you to Gifts of Hope as we're into the giving season. And we try to make it content rich, because we really do take seriously, I think, our role in development education, helping Canadians understand really practical things that they can do and be part of our movement, which is to, without any kind of slight lightness to it, is to change real people's lives around the world.
Well, thank you, Rosemary, for being here today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, I was speaking with Rosemary McCarney, who is the President and CEO of Plan Canada. Again, you can find out more information if you go on the website at plancanada.ca. Well, my second guest I'll be speaking with is Patricia Muir, who is the founder of Maestro Quality. We'll be talking about how you can create a workplace that is good for everyone, so stay right there.